Hi. I know I'm in a coveted gap right after the excellent lunch, and if you had seconds, I know that you're going to be struggling to fight off that nap, but I'm in your camp, so if I doze off, somebody just prod. My name is Mark Hurd. I work in the ICS security group at, or ICS consulting group at Mandiant. I have if you read the bio, I've got a long misspent youth as a control system engineer in the chemical sector, and I can, I think, safely categorize myself as a recovering end user. But I've been in security a while, and I want to talk to you a little bit this afternoon, or it is this afternoon now, about getting into industrial control system security. There's quite a, and I appreciate those of you that have moved down front. There's still lots of seats. I know the gravity's turned up pretty high back there, but if you struggle through it, you can get down a little closer. There's a little bit of audience participation that we're going to engage in a moment, and that may be at least important to me. But the thing to emphasize, if you haven't already realized, is that IT and information technology and operational technology, there's a lot of overlap, but they're not exactly the same thing. And if you're involved, if you work for a company and you're interested in enterprise-wide security, that's going to include the operational technology plant force stuff, but it isn't necessarily going to be all the same issues and going to run at the same pace as IT. They're not equivalent, nor are they equal substitutes for each other. By the way, as I understand, the slides for these presentations are going to be hosted by Iron Geek sometime real soon now. As far as getting copy of slides, I'm not sure what that mechanism is going to be. You can always reach out to me, and I can provide you some more detail with this. This deck's going to have some links and such in it that might be useful to you. I know the Mandiant guys have posted their information, and whereas the brain hurt in this session isn't going to be as high as it was in theirs, but getting access to the slides is still, we understand, as being interesting and useful to you. This is a link to a little video that Rockwell put together that's a retro encapsulator that is filled with enough jargon to fill several bingo cards, and it's kind of entertaining to watch. It's about a 2-minute video. It's really too big to embed and to play here, but I wanted to point you to that in the process. No, I don't have it embedded. We may double back and link up and play it, depending on how boring this session gets at the end. But if you've not seen it, again, it's a whole lot of jargon disguised with some hand waving and a sales pitch. So this is the audience participation part. What are you doing here? What would you like to get from this session? Didn't hear from school. I was hoping I was going to ask, are there any Utes present? But it's not age dependent. So if you hear from school, that's fantastic. I was hoping to get folks that were interested in learning about this who were actual students, not just students of life. Any other criteria, something that you don't want to leave here without me saying something about? ICS. What is ICS? We will definitely talk about that. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a trend pretty early. And just kind of emphasizing the need and why at least I see the need to have a conversation like this out in the open. Anything else? If something else occurs as you go along, let's go ahead and talk about that. And first of all, in talking about ICS, is kind of a broad term, and I could wax on for a while. And it's if you were from government a few years ago, the last decade, you would call it SCADA. If you were overseas, you'd call it SCADA. Different people call it different things, and that was one of the initial problems in getting control system security off the ground, is that when you started trying to put together a discussion around security best practices or standards, the guys that had RTUs weren't reading the PLC documents, and they weren't reading the DCS documents, and the people that had DCSs weren't reading the SCADA documents, and all of these are really the same thing. I mean, industrial control systems is kind of the catch-all phrase that has kind of been embraced by the 600-pound gorilla, which is the Department of Homeland Security. And they've created a group in the late 2000s called the ICS JWG. Terrible acronym. Stands for Industrial Control Systems Joint Working Group. And it's a place to kind of get all of these disparate groups and silos and verticals talking and sharing together. And this phrase is kind of talk, kind of stuck. That it encompasses what you might call SCADA, PLC systems. It covers building automation systems, covers manufacturing control systems, or industrial automation and control systems. All those phrases basically are ICS. Okay, that help? Hurt? Okay, there's lots more acronyms here, and I'll try to be careful about that because there's a huge amount of acronym poisoning in this field. If you look at this trend, there's kind of a hockey stick type of effect here. You notice in the early, say before 2010, it's kind of relatively flat. But then since 2010, there's a lot of activity in that. Why? Okay, magic word here. Stuxnet. Okay, can't have an ICS security talk without saying it at least once, right? And I said if we if this was a drinking game, this is where we get started big. So why Stuxnet? It showed up on the radar. I mean, it was a proof of concept. I mean, it was not beyond a proof of concept. It was an actual successful exploit targeted at an industrial control system, which got a lot of the security researchers interested. I'm using that term as broad as that's hackers. And so what used to be kind of side conversations at security conferences, or maybe even something that was at the end of a dead-end hallway, suddenly got moved up and got to be keynotes. And so you got a lot more security researchers interested in that. Security researchers start looking at things, and what do you know? They find stuff. So you see these bigger bars here are things that are actually discovered vulnerabilities, discovered and published vulnerabilities. They're actually exploits. The reddish color there, depending on your degree of color blindness. And then the green bar is the actual malware, the stuff that becomes targeted at industrial control systems, or at least where malware is put together as part of an industrial control systems attack. So we kind of have a lost decade of not a whole lot of progress and attention being put on it, and suddenly now this event occurs, the Stuxnet event, and there's a lot of gas being thrown in this process. Now, this is the really framing the problem that I'm here to try to address. Is that and think about the overlap in these two diagrams. Okay, the industrial control system humans. There are many people that are involved with the care and feeding and design, implementation, and so on and so forth, modification, upgrading of industrial control systems, engineers, technicians, operators. Lots of people in many companies all over the world are involved in industrial control systems. The number of security humans, and this is again based on a very unscientific study, but just looking at security-related listings in 2015 of people that say that they're involved as security professionals on LinkedIn, is about 189,000. So we got millions with 189,000 and a tiny little overlap. A tiny little overlap that basically points at saying that there's about 1,000 people that have been identified as industrial control system security professionals. Well, now we hear from the trolls. So the point being is the question is this 0.5% really adequate to protect the critical infrastructure? Really? And so that's the need to even to consider a topic like this is that I'd like to try to recruit you. I'd like to try to take your interest, your broad interest, even if you just came to find out what the acronym meant, to start with this broad interest and get you more interested in following up with the next steps and getting into industrial control system security. So let's consider the first side. Out of curiosity, how many people would describe yourselves in your current position as being involved with the plant floor, manufacturing operations, the operational technology side? Ooh, not many. Okay. Well, a few, a stalwart. Let's say theoretically that you were, though, and I'll walk you through what I think will be useful information and how to get started down the path of bringing more game in industrial control systems. Maybe you know somebody, maybe back where you work, who works with these folks, or acts as a consultant or as an integrator, or even from the vendor side, or you've got your brother-in-law, your neighbor works inside of this, and you would like to go back and seed them with some of this information, engage their interests, and help them get along. Or you just know somebody that's interested in this. I think this material will also be useful to you. Operational technology is not the same as industrial technology because it's a matter of priority. A lot of the same technologies are deployed. They're Windows and Linux PCs that are connected to systems of systems that do things that manufacture, to protect, or run interlocks. They establish some kind of automation functionality. And if you're already on the OT side, then you're already familiar with that process. You already got that in the bank. You already know about the safety culture inside of your company. You know the plant and process works. You're used to using things like programmable logic controllers or remote terminal units. You're already used to those and how they're architected together. And you maybe have had some kind of exposure to some of the protocols and such that they use. You may even be familiar with things like NERC-CIP for the energy industry, or CFATs for the chemical sector, that are security standards that are used by those industries to help them improve their process control security posture. So you've already got that kind of stuff going for you, even if you aren't currently involved. But now's the opportunity for you to start learning some more about security. And rather than starting out specifically learning everything about process control security, there's some general security stuff to help you kind of think like a bad guy. Get past that, well, why would anybody want to do that kind of question? And start saying that, like with safety, you go through and you're inside of your plant culture with safety, you spend a lot of time in design and review saying, well, what could go wrong? What if I got the wrong material here, or this pipe leaked, or this busted, or this pump overheated? You consider what might go wrong. Well, from the security point of view, it's really the same event that we're talking about, but I'm thinking about somebody making it go wrong and using electronic means to be able to do that. So there's a huge amount of overlap. You already got the right sensibilities working in operations. You just need to start thinking like a bad guy. Get in touch with that inner vandal and thinking about how you can leverage that information to cause some harm. And you do that by basically trying to go and interface, learn, and talk to the folks that already know what it is that you want to know. Jason stole a lot of my thunder earlier today, and he talked about building these relationships. And the relationships are key here. You've got to find the people who know what it is that you want and develop relationships with them. Open up a channel of communication so that you can have an information exchange between you. It's going to be mutually beneficial. One of the things you need to do, obviously, is go to security conferences like this one where the subject matter is going to be talked about. You can also there's lots and lots of material that's available online. There's a particular security training that you can go to from folks like SANS and Red Tiger and SCADA Hacker, and of course ICS Cert, which your tax dollars at work is the price is nice. It's free, but you do have to go to Idaho Falls to take so you got a little travel and lodging that's going to be involved. But it's really terrific training. There's also some release. This Samurai STFU, which is a particular Linux distro that's designed like Backtrack with most of the commonly used tools that could be used to break into hardware and software at the control system level, as well as some of the best tools that would be taken from like a Backtrack CD, as well as some other things that were developed by the folks at Utilisec who put together this particular distribution. It's like a security testing function utility, I think what the acronym stands for. There are some other things in the Shodan.io websites that you can basically go to learn more about what some of the security issues are for the operational technology systems. But inside the companies you work for, that you already employ security experts. They're guys that already have passes like yours and go to the same workplace that you do, and go to the same meetings and the town halls and such that you do that are inside your company that are already security experts. So make friends with some of those guys. Find out who they are. Find out who the networking security folks are, and learn what it is, some of what they do about configuring switches and firewalls. Learn about how security architecture works within your company by talking to the people that are just like you inside of your company and just trying to do a good job. And look out for your enterprise's interests. Of course, this may require developing some new skills and tastes. Like if you aren't already interested in caffeine, you may have to develop an interest in caffeine. Another thing that you can do is create an ICS lab. And a lot of times, the cartoon here illustrates, you can do anything you want as long as you don't have to buy any hardware and software. But probably inside of your company, you've got enough spare parts laying around for your industrial control systems that you can configure most of a lab with just the spare parts that you got that are lying around in boxes. I mean, if somebody needs this part, they're going to come there and they're going to take the power supply off your lab. But in the meantime, you can use it as part of your lab. And so just using a few of these spare parts that you've got and being creative, you might have to go to your vendor and broker them to donate an HMI license or something and sign an agreement that says you won't use it for production, but you'll just use it inside of a lab environment. But with a little bit of creativity, you can set up your own lab on site. Many companies do this, and I can't recommend it highly enough because it gives you a place to begin learning about how your system behaves under high traffic situations, or what happens when you patch, or what happens when you get some kind of program that you want to introduce and it's going to soak up a lot of CPU. How the operator console is going to behave. You find out in kind of a benign environment instead of your live production environment. It's one of the things with ICS inside of your plant manufacturing areas. Live production is king. I mean, they'll run with malware so long as they're continuing to make Class 1 product. And they don't want to take the interruption, even to take the malware off the system, if they're making production product or if it's a critical portion in production. The availability of that system ends up having a lot more impact to them than the other security components. And that's something that you have to take special care when you're learning about security. Is never work on live equipment without permission. And that's general good security practice. You know, as a security professional, you never work on somebody else's system without explicit permission. That's just being upfront, professional, and ethical. Now, you know, if they've hired you to pen test it, when they want you to break into it, that's different. You know, you've negotiated. You're doing it with their permission, but don't use anything that you learned as a security professional against a system that you don't have explicit permission to do that with. Just a general rule. So Stuxnet happened. Okay, that's and I'm not going to talk in detail about Stuxnet because you'd have to have a bucket of cold water to throw on. But it was an amazing hack, and it as a demonstration of what you could do with extreme amount of inside knowledge at a very targeted attack. Stuxnet certainly demonstrated that and demonstrated it in a big way. So beyond the proof of concept for your operation, what's your Stuxnet? Okay, think about, and again, this is like you put your inner vandal hat on and step back a little bit and said, if somebody knew what I knew about my process, how my process works, or how my system is architected, what could they make go wrong? If somebody had my prints, they had my operational procedures, they had access to the information that I've got, what could they make? So what? What would be the consequences of that? You might think, well, it's too complicated. You know, I got some process engineer on staff that had to design this, and nobody understands how it works except him, except for the fact that it's all mapped out in the control system. All of his knowledge about how the process works got pumped into a configuration of programming inside of the control system. It's all in there. And so if someone had access to that and stole the process files and had them available and time on their hands, what would they be able to discover? Also, through some of your testing on a lab, you might actually find and discover a vulnerability that you can publish and go to your vendor with to get remediated and get fame and glory and such that might be associated with publishing a vulnerability if that kind of thing scratches your itch. But the idea is the whole hacker mindset, to really understand something how to work, you do have to spend some time maybe breaking it and understanding how to not only take it apart and then put it back together again. And of course, at Mandiant, we like to promote finding evil at each and every opportunity we get the opportunity. There's this idea of red team, the attack, and the blue team, to defend. Learn what the language of these two environments are and how they interact together. There's Metasploits. It's all kind of, you know, they hide knowledge in books, you know, and that's exactly the scenario that we're talking about here. When it may be frustrating that I came to listen to you to tell me how to do this, and I'm going to tell you to read books. But the fact of the matter is that they hide a lot of knowledge in books, and what you can learn about Metasploit, what you can learn about Showdown, what you can learn about things like fuzzing and snort and such. There's lots of stuff that's written up about that, whether it's published digitally or published in the old school dead tree versions. Finding and locating some of these books and adding them to your library and studying them is going to be time well spent. Yes. I've heard of a few of them, as it turns out. Some of them are. Yeah, I know. He's a world-class troll, I'm told. But no, it's he's got, and you can, even at conferences, another benefit to going to conferences like this, you might actually meet some of these guys that had input into these books or actually were involved and published them. This DFIR, this is something that's relatively new to the process automation, the process control, this digital forensics and incident response. It's well developed inside of the IT. There's a lot of cutting edge development and some pretty good disciplines and tools that have been developed for it. It's still pretty new for the ICS side. There's not a lot of folks that are prepared to do that. And, you know, what happens when you discover that someone has impacted, you've got an intrusion on a process automation system? That's going to present a new bunch of challenges to how your company is going to handle that. That if it really pays off to do your homework and think about it before then, as opposed to finding out afterwards. I mean, if your company's relationship with law enforcement, the local law like FBI, isn't in pretty good shape, if somebody from China breaks into your process automation system, you'll have a lot of scrambling to do as you build that relationship up so that you guys can help each other. Doing that before the incident occurs is huge. Mere words cannot describe. Find out what their capabilities are, find out how they can help you, what their expectations would be for them to help you. If they're counting on you pulling the hard drives and presenting them to them as forensic evidence, well then the first thing you ought to do shouldn't be format the hard drive and restore a backup, because all the forensic evidence disappeared. Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll plug that a little later on and keep mentally a placeholder right there. But there are groups that you can become involved with as well, and we'll talk about those just a little later on. Let's suppose, as the majority of you probably indicate, that your interest is in information technology or computer science or something from the IT side, and you'd like to go the other direction. You'd like to like to get into industrial control system security, but aren't quite sure where to get started. I can see a lot of nods here, so maybe this is the sweet spot to go to. Well, of course, Google is your friend. But you have to be able to ask good questions to get the information you want. All the information that's basically been collected since mankind's been collecting information is probably available from Google. But the real payoff is when you ask the right kinds of questions. So you look for things like about the Modbus specification. Modbus is one of these computer protocols that's used down in industrial control systems that all kinds of devices can talk to, and that's one of the kind of the Babylon fish, I guess, if you're familiar with the Hitchhiker's Guide. The idea is that, if you can talk this one language, then everybody understands, or basic, I guess, in Federation talk. There's also tons of people of the communities made all sorts of things available on resources like GitHub. If you aren't familiar with Wireshark, that's a good tool to get familiar with, and then to go and look for some of the PCAPs, some of the network captures that are online that you can get from places like SANS and S4 and some of these other libraries that you can download and replay those PCAPs through Wireshark and just see what the conversations look like. Okay, the Modbus is one of those protocols that's been encapsulated inside of TCP/IP. So as a TCP/IP packet, it's got all the Ethernet stuff on it, but at its core, it's the same Modbus spec that was developed in the 80s. The payload is still largely in clear text and in exactly the same command formats and such as the old 1200 baud, 8 bits, 8-bit words, one stop bit, no parity that the spec was developed against. There's, of course, scads and scads of YouTube videos and how-tos that have been made available. Tapes or, recordings of presentations like this and such that you could find that are available in a number of different formats. Again, going in and asking specifically for SCADA, control systems, PLC. How it's made is kind of interesting. And they not only talk about the chemistry and the manufacturing processes and such, but they actually give you pictures of some of the environments in which how things are made, so that you can actually learn quite a bit. Again, it's almost accidental getting educated by watching videos. That's kind of an almost futuristic concept, but there's a lot of that information that's freely available to you. If you're on the IT side and you already got pretty good IT chops, and you may actually have a network at home, well, you can begin to add to that network by making a little IT network. You can get some things like Raspberry Pi and these Arduinos, little programmable widgets that you can buy either from a lot of different manufacturers or on eBay. You can actually go to eBay and find some PLCs and human-machine interfaces, HMIs. In this particular case, you can find them occasionally, buy them basically by the pound by buying them from eBay. And even seeing some new equipment that's been superseded or left over from a job. That $700 is a lot to spend, but if it's something that you want to learn about, that's not. It's less than you would pay for a security course. And with it, you can download generally the CDs and development tools and such from the manufacturers and learn a lot from just getting one of these things in your environment, down in your basement, where you can begin to play with it a little bit. Many of these things, you get a Raspberry Pi and it comes kind of ready to be loaded with an image or a personality, and you can do some searches, get some things, do some connection, get some research, do specific research on things like OpenDMP and Modbus to be able to get the personalities that you want to load on the device and have it talk to Modbus protocol and respond to even very simple command line interfaces from a Windows-based laptop. Again, there's a lot of learning, and I can't school you up completely here, but there's a lot of tools that are available that are either open source or even they might be licensed, but they'll run for 10 or 20 minutes at a time. It would be suitable for you to learn what the very basics that you want to become familiar with. Okay, so you know security, you've learned about it, you've self-taught, or you've been in courses or classes, you're at the university, you've maybe gotten a CCNA or some other certification from the ICS side or from the IT side, but you want to learn more about ICS. So you're not really quite there yet. You've learned some of the landscape, you learned some of the terminology, and I'm going to give you the secret to get in behind the closed doors to get the information that you want. Ready? Wait for it. Donuts. The universal language of control rooms everywhere. And yes, I mean donuts. Don't underestimate the power of a pastry. And this is really, I'm saying this facetiously, but really this is about developing this relationship. If you work for a company and you're in the IT side and the company is manufacturing something, the information you want is already inside the fence. Okay, your company already employs process control system experts. You just need to find them and apply them for information. Now, you can't just drop in and shadow them. You've got to develop a relationship. You've got to show that you're genuinely interested in what it is that you're doing and learning from them. And even offer to tell them to share what you know about your environment with them. Particularly if you're in network or the networking or the portion of IT that actually interfaces with the process control systems, then you've got a real strong basis for you to begin the conversation and develop a relationship. I'm not going to take credit for that. I don't think even Jason did as well. I've been hearing people talking, like James Arlen, been talking about this for years. That you find somebody who knows what you want, you ply them with pizza or coffee or donuts until they tell you what you want to know. And if they don't know, they'll probably be very, very quick to tell you and give you a pointer to the guy that does. So maybe you're starting with what you think is the lead operator in the control room, but he's not the SCADA admin. He'll quickly point you. He'll tell you what he knows, I think, especially in exchange for some pastries. But he'll point you to the guy that you need to talk to, your SCADA admin, to really start getting the information that you want to know about how the system's architecture, where it's simple, where it's hard, what why can't you run AV on a PLC? Antivirus software on a PLC. Why can't you apply it? Why don't they patch it every Tuesday when Microsoft patches? You'll begin to find that information from the people that are actually familiar with and closer to the environment. Again, they hide the information in books. And so the manuals may be online. There may be a couple of linear feet of them in a bookshelf in the SCADA admin's office. But the information that you want about how the system is architected, how it works, is generally contained inside of those manuals. So you're going to have to spend some time with those as well. And again, this is assuming that your interest in this is genuine. And I think the guys in the control room can sniff out the fakes. If you're just killing time, or you're looking for something, a bullet to put on your accomplishments for the year to fill out your resume, they'll detect that. Okay, their sincerity detectors, their BS detectors are generally pretty good, because they traffic in a lot of it, frankly. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to learn and to help, they're anxious for all the help that they can get. And particularly if it builds them an ally on the other side of the department. And really, that's the kind of solution, the relationships that you want to build anyway. That's your company is counting on you guys to be good stewards of your environment and develop those relationships so that the company can leverage them for success. That's really a big picture company motto. Go to your conference rooms and such, and see the stuff that's on the walls inside the conference room about your mission statements and the personality of the company. All of this stuff builds into that. And so your building into this is really, really something your company is really interested in. Another tip is that don't go down to Walmart or go to the company supply and get a fresh hard hat and try to take into the control room, because that again kind of stands out. Here's a noob. Here's somebody that doesn't get out into the plant very often. So if they give you a brand spanking new hard hat with a company logo on it and stuff, you might want to take it out the parking lot and kick it around a little bit and put a little wear and tear on it, just to show that you're somebody that's lived through a few things. I don't recommend getting actual incidents. You don't want to go out and stand and have people drop stuff on your hard hat. Interesting, we went on an engagement recently, and one of the guys from the red team was charged. They were going to a place where we got to have hard-toed shoes and got to have hard hats. So we went to the Lowe's and got a hard hat, but he just bought the shell. He didn't get the harness inside. So the shell was kind of flopping around on his head, and says, "How does this thing stay on? Am I missing a strap?" So yeah, those kind of things, that's not the kind of impression that you want to pass. You want to get the actual fully working PPE, and if you scuff it up a little bit, that won't hurt you at all. Any questions about any of this so far? I've kind of slogged through this because I was thinking we'd get more questions toward the end. Lots of smiles, nods. Yeah? Okay. Later. Okay. Dumb looks are still free. What are some of the resources that you can get to? And we've talked about some of them thus far, but there are some things that you can do electronically. There's a SCADASEC email list that you can get to at Infracritical. That's again, it may be like drinking from a fire hose initially, but you can, as you begin to get those emails, if you just go ahead and catalog them, and then you can search them inside of your email client to pick out the juicy stuff that you want to know. If you want to know what Heartbleed or specifically about Rockwell PLCs, that you can with that information there that you gathered from this mailing list and the discussions that are on it, you can go out and mine that for more juicy stuff later on. A lot of ICS focused security conferences, and they vary. These are the ones. These are not. You notice that there's not RSA or some of the DEF CON and Black Hat, although there is some ICS content in those conferences now. Those aren't really about ICS. These conferences are all focused on industrial control systems, and in varying degree, the varying degrees of technical. To get started with, I'm going to have to recommend, and it sounds crazy, but the government is here to help you. ICS JWG, the DHS effort, it's free, it's accessible. There's a lot of people that's the first conference that they attend, and it's a way to kind of learn the landscape, learn the community, find out what some of the topics are. There's technical stuff, but there's then some 101 type topics as well. The S4 conference is much more tuned to the propeller head. The 4 S's stand for SCADA Scientific Security Summit. And it's a place where there's a lot of research that's shared, a lot of stuff that's more of a deep dive technically, as well as more policy and general information as well. SANS ICS Summit is a good it's a different cross section than some of these others. It's got a lot to recommend it, but it's also fairly expensive. But it is if your company has already embraced the SANS offerings, this may be a good place to go. 4.6 is in Europe. That's kind of a stretch, but it's a relatively new conference. It has great buzz around it. EnergySec is a nonprofit that is focused on the energy sector. The SEC stands for security, though not sector. But it's focused on the energy sector, but it has a lot of great content. It's more of a grassroots and informal, terrific community. A good place to be able to go. And then there's some that are like the oil and gas security summits, and some that are sponsored like by Joe Weiss, the so-called WiseCon that now has a more official sponsor. It's held in the fall in Atlanta. So there's lots of conferences that are available to you, and these are good places to learn, good places to get engaged with the community. And so don't just plan on going and soaking up. Going and plan on participating, asking questions. Finding good speakers and asking them questions in the hallway. The hallway track is usually almost worth leaving the house for by itself. So this is a great place to learn more about what you'd like to do. Information sharing. This information sharing and analysis committees are very big, and the information sharing and analysis organizations differ in that the ISACs are pretty well directed at a particular vertical, like water or energy or chemicals. The organizations are going to be much broader. As a matter of fact, they're going to be organized more like around legal, accounting, integrators, so on. So they're broader in their functionality, but they are focused. The idea of the ICS ISAC, the Industrial Control Systems ISAC, was set up a few years ago, and it's operated by Chris Blask. And got a number of participants in it, both end users and vendors, and of course the famed beer ISAC, which goes along with almost any of these conferences in which you get the folks that are talking offline about the same stuff they were talking about online during the conference, and just continuing the conversations over your favorite beverage. And the beer ISAC is kind of a broad nickname. It's not you don't have to like beer. If you don't like beer, they'll still let you in. There's not a blood initiation or a secret handshake or anything. But the idea is it's very informal information sharing that is hugely valuable. Again, the interaction with the community is huge. Sometimes. That, and frankly, the gossip and backbiting can be savage, but you just got to take that. That's part of any healthy community.
I was going to say, our community maybe is a little more trolly, but because we maybe care
That's true. That's true. And having experienced some of these, like I said, some of the backbitings in the IRC channel, some of the while the conferences are going on, perhaps even now, can be pretty savage. But again, there's a high amount of passion here, and nobody is in it just for the lulz. Nobody that I know of is just joined up because I have excess snark. The passion here is an evidence of how much people want to care and they want to make a difference. I mean, it really is a Seneconian kind of Captain America shit, but we're really trying to make the world better. We're trying not to live in the state we were, 15 years ago, which is basically the control system industry was pretty content to just continue on in that state. And without the intervention of this community, arguably we wouldn't see the progress that we've got now. And I'll point you to that. Is that what's changed? You say IT and OT are different, and OT moves slower than IT. In 2016, you can buy securable gear. 2005, you couldn't. It was insecure by design. It was broken when you got it. And you had to go to extraordinary measures to get it to a level of security that you could live with. In 2016, you can buy securable gear. And that didn't happen accidentally. We didn't back into that. Microsoft didn't make that happen, although Microsoft is big and is in use in a lot of these systems that use critical infrastructure protection equipment. SANS didn't make it happen. The government didn't make it happen. The community made it happen. It's people drawing attention to this, and the companies were willing to say, we don't want to continue. When that's old and busted. When we use that kind of equipment configured in that way, we got owned. Okay, the new hotness is we don't want that to happen again. I don't want that to happen on my watch. And that kind of motion got us to the state, at least now that we can say that we can, for the motivated buyer, you can buy securable gear. And a lot of that happened by grassroots type stuff. Some of it with the government hands, some of it by industry and regulation. Compliance was a driver. It got to face facts. It was. And it is. But we wouldn't have gotten here, I think, without the community responding in this fashion. I mentioned some books. These are some books that are specifically focused on industrial control system security. And again, if you want to try to copy this down, take a picture, that's fine. But I'll certainly provide all this information to you if you'll reach out to me. If it's not legible on the presentations, I don't know how that's going to set up. The Countdown to Zero Day. Anybody read that? Kim Zetter wrote this book. It's at least it's focused on Stuxnet. If you want to know more about Stuxnet, it's a really good tome. There's a lot about Stuxnet that's been published in dossiers by people like Symantec. Ralph Langner has published a lot of material on it. Probably knows as much as anybody about Stuxnet, and even some of the alpha, some of the earlier versions that his firm has done research on. So it's not all of these things they're certainly ICS security related, but they're not all how-to or textbooks type things that are been published. There's also some that are coming that will be out fairly shortly. This Handbook of SCADA Control Systems, second edition, Hacking Exposed, the industrial control system focus of it. That's coming real soon too. There's also a lot of intelligence resources. If you aren't connected up with ICS CERT, this is an area that you're interested in. Getting connected up with ICS CERT, it's something that you can't just visit the website. You're going to have to actually apply and get granted access through a portal. But getting access to something like that gets you access to the vulnerability bulletins as they're published and some of the remediations that have been taking place. That's certainly worthwhile. ISAC portals, again, you've got to join the ISAC. You've got to be accepted by the ISAC and be prepared. You may be turned down if you aren't actually a member of that particular vertical that the ISAC is servicing. They want to be particular about the people that they share the information with because they don't want people that frankly aren't qualified or aren't really interested in helping to have access as much information to the folks that are truly engaged and rolled up and are dedicated toward improving their company and their operation security posture by providing and subscribing the information here. Sir. iSight Partners is now a part of Mandiant, now a part of FireEye technically. iSight is an intelligence firm that consumed a company called Critical Intelligence that was ICS-specific intel. So they went out and they bought this ICS-specific intel company to include as part of their offerings, and then FireEye included them as part of FireEye's offerings. They do publish things that are out in the open. There's several of them that are available. Yes, it is. And its company is focused on doing threat intelligence. They do training and some other things too, but they're focused on basically leveraging threat intelligence to better protection. You can go on Twitter and search for those hashtags, ICS and SCADA and PLCs, RTUs, that sort of thing, or even a particular vendor like Honeywell or Rockwell that may be able to point you to some interesting articles and things that are published through those avenues as well. There's of course Google is your friend, but again the successful Google person is going to get mine information for Google either by asking very good questions or a lot of trial and error in getting to the good questions. But Google is a tremendous resource in being able to collect information like this. There are, of course, standards published. And if you're interested in the ICS security, then going to the standards and best practices that have already been published is a good start. The NIST 800-82, it's currently in its current revision. I think they just underwent a request for public comments, or it was released to the public for feedback to include in the next revision. It has a lot of practices, and if you're involved with any kind of government facility, it may not be a good idea. It's the law. That's the NIST 800 is the way that most of the systems are expected to behave and be governed by. ISA 99 was started in 2002 by a bunch of vendors and end users and academics, basically to say for the Instrumentation Automation Society of America, they have standards that are around safety. They got standards that are around alarm management, standards around flexible batch controls. A lot of standards that they published, and rather than going back to each and every one of those standards and adding a security section, they decided to make an overarching security standard that's ISA 99. And so basically all those other standards would go that have a heading that said security, and under it would say see ISA 99. So this manufacturing control systems, this ICS, this standard is designed to be able to do that. Work is still underway in this standard. It's still developing, and if you're interested in pursuing that, I know the ISA would welcome your participation. They kind of halted a few years ago, and aligned all of the language in the standards to the IEC standard so the standard could be used internationally. And I guess technically, maybe the better title is the second one, the IEC 62443. But I'm old school ISA 99. That's still what I call it. And it is the reference architecture for security inside of process automation systems. NERC SIP is targeted specifically at the energy generation systems or energy delivery systems. Its scope is broadening. It's currently in its 5th revision. And it used to be only if you generated over a certain level, a certain amount that you have to follow into the standards. But they're becoming broader as the time goes on, and they're becoming less of a checkbox sort of standard and more of, are you acting responsibly to take care of your asset? That's the thing with CFATS. CFATS is a chemical facility anti-terrorism standard, and it was designed and DHS was charged by Congress to secure the chemical sector. And this standard is a result of that. ACC and other chemical entities had a lot of input into it. It's a very good standard, but at its core, it's saying, can you demonstrate that you were in control of your process at all times? That's kind of the big overarching question that all the rest of the standard is built around. So there are many others that you can go to, but many of these are available very easily on the internet. You can just simply go and research them and download them and begin learning about what the issues are inside of a particular vertical or even across industrial control systems altogether by looking at those standards. There are, of course, training that's available. ICS CERT, I mentioned they offer this epic 5-day training course that at the center of it is a live red-blue training. They divide the class into red team and blue team, and you attack an actual plant. They've got an actual plant and a power plant and everything there inside the building. The blue team is charged with keeping it running. The red team is charged with whatever mayhem that they can bring. And it's scored. And so it's a 12-hour long day in which they give you some instruction up to Wednesday, and then Wednesday you spend in this rather terrifying seat of the pants experience that's a red team, blue team exercise. And on Thursday, they do a hot wash, you do a discussion, they explain what happened, you deconstruct everything, and then they provide some supplemental training on the 5th day. It's really completely unique, and I recommend it to you. Again, the cost is right. It's free. You just have to schedule it. and get to Idaho Falls where the facility is. Sir? Pardon? Yes, it does. And they will offer it. Sometimes some people come in and it's just FBI or just law enforcement or just energy or just chemicals or just oil and gas, and they kind of can continue the training like that. But I can't recommend it high enough. ICS vendor training, you can go to get a lot of security training from people like Honeywell and Telvent and ABB and Invensys. There's the SANS ICS 410 and ICS 515. 410 is associated with a certification. And 515 is a so-called active defense, but it's really about doing intel and folding what you can gather from open source intelligence and paid source intelligence into developing and staying ahead of the threat inside of your individual company. There are several smaller companies, boutique-type companies like Red Tiger Security, Lofty Perch, and SCADA Hacker that also offer training of various stripes that you can avail yourself of. The only one's free up here is the ICS Cert one, though. Certification. It's really an emerging field. There's not a lot in the way of certification. It won't hurt you to have a CISSP. There are a good number of practitioners in the industrial control system space that have a CISSP. But CISSP really wasn't conceived in thinking about process control systems. And there's really nothing about process control systems specific on that particular certification. It won't hurt you to have it, and in many cases, particularly if you're going to hang out your shingle on your own, it may help you get a bid that you normally might not be considered for if you've got CISSP associated with you. It's kind of like there's not a professional engineering license for security, but then everyone's not an engineer. There are going to be practitioners inside of the industrial control system space that aren't engineers, that came on as SATA admins or lead engineers or came over from the IT side. There's a recent certification. It's a Global Information Industrial Control System Security Professional, GICSP. It was developed by GIAC. The training courses is the ICS 410 class that SANS offers that ensures that IT practitioners know the basics of ICS and the ICS people know the basics of security. It's a noble effort. It's constantly being refined. And it doesn't say this person is an expert, but it says that they're minimally qualified to work on your systems. That said, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and look into that if you'd like to learn more about this and bring more game to your ICS knowledge. So here's, again, the obligatory screen of links that talk about some of the things that we've talked about here, about some of the government standards, some of the training sites. There's an excellent library that SCADA Hacker, Joe Langle puts together. There's lots of, like the emailing list and the different publications that you can follow, and of course it's constantly changing. But this list of links may be a good starting point. So, still here. Sir?
So, when you're involved in red team engagement for ICS, right, a lot of it does penetration testing. So, if you're testing applications, you can always spin up a copy of the application and your testing network. You have to be a little more careful, or maybe they shade you off with some energy on the image. And then the stakes are pretty high in ICS.
Yes, they are.
What are the rules of engagement? How do you scope something like that? I mean, how can you possibly test a production factory where processes are actually occurring without literally killing someone?
Good question.
What are the rules of engagement around that?
And they will vary for every engagement. A lot of times they won't, the assessment ends up you don't do an actual pen test on the system. You do the pen test to prove that you can get access to the system. Okay? And that doesn't mean that when you get access, you're going to run Nessus or an Nmap against 65,000 TCP ports. Okay? You just prove, you get a shell, you get a command prompt on the system from external, and that's all you've got to get is a screenshot showing that you could get that far. Because I don't want to impact the system. Occasionally, we get the opportunity of going in and doing a penetration test on a line that's down. Okay, you got maybe a generation plant with 4 units, and that unit is down for servicing. The ICS is still live, though. And they go in and they say, okay, you've got a very specific target here. If you can get here, what can you tell me? What could you exfiltrate? Okay, just to be able to do that, and it has to be orchestrated very, very carefully. Like you said, the rules of engagement have to be laid out very carefully. And even with companies that come in and do a pen test where there's an ICS somewhere in the operation, generally the IT department's gone up and said, this range of IP addresses, don't even bother. Okay, don't tell me that you can get there. Or, maybe that's all they want to know, is that can you even see these IP addresses? And that's all that they're allowed to do. The companies that don't do that sometimes get a nasty surprise from the pen tester. They said, yeah, I got the tunneled in, I found a default account, we're off to the races. And yeah, you get something happening that you don't want to have happen. It's very, very rare that you're going to work on a live system. Working on a live system that's inert, or got a portion of the process that's down, maybe there's a plant-wide shutdown for pressure vessel inspection or something. But even then, they've probably got interlocks running and other important things that they're doing that of supporting the shutdown operations that don't want you to break the system or to take it down or to reboot it. If they've got a lab, I mentioned about getting a lab. This is another nice thing. If you got a lab environment, then yeah, let them run amok, and let them bring their laptops in and do the torture test and the ping of death and all that stuff in your lab. That's another good reason to have a lab, is that you can get a more thorough test of the environment. Now, of course, the challenge is the lab isn't a full-scale system, and it doesn't have all the controllers and all the HMIs and all the activity, all the alarms that are going on because it's not making product. It's a tiny subset, but you can still learn a lot from that particular pen test. I like what you're thinking. Yeah, the stakes are high, and you don't want to run. I mean, the stories are rife. There's all kinds of stuff about medical systems inside of hospitals and process control systems that fell prey to an Nmap scam. Just simply because of networks, these devices were never counting on talking to somebody 65,000 times in the briefest amount of time. They just weren't built for that. Nobody ever intended they would do that. And another dirty little secret while we're talking about these networks, these ICS networks, even though they may run on a gigabit Ethernet or something like that, at their heart, they're still these little protocols. And they're based on a network that has made some basic assumptions that everyone on this network belongs, and no one who doesn't belong will ever be connected to this network. And these protocols like Modbus and such go back to the days of 8 bits, 1 stop bit, no parity, 9600 baud, all clear text. Okay, their packets are still just like that. And you've got to be careful about those environments and not break those assumptions, because they're just not prepared to take that kind of traffic. So, no, yes, sir. That are very plainly EOL. But that's all true. There are some places, and the problem is the patching is really hard. It's a hard proposition, all right? Because even the people that patch will have to concede they've incurred more downtime from patching than they did from the malware. They've had one configure attack on their system, though, and that'll change that statistic forever. Because if you've not patched your system since 2009, configure is every bit the threat to you right now as it was in 2009. You could. And there are, just because you're running Windows XP Service Pack 2 as it was shipped, doesn't mean that you can't patch the system. You may not be able to patch it while it's running. You may have to go to your vendor and get a point release or something like that has all the patches rolled up in it, but you can take a shutdown. And all of these systems, they run for long periods of time, but none of them, they'll tell you they need to be up 100% of the time, or, 5 nines, 99.999. But even that's going to give you a window of a day or so per year that you could apply patches. The I can't patch scenario is a hard one to defend, because the patches, after all, fix problems. Okay? Some of them exist to prevent an exploit, but some of them exist to prevent a divide by zero. And you're just one bad programming stroke away from crashing your system by yourself. So fixing problems due to, not patching because I don't want to incur the downtime, is getting tougher and tougher to withhold. But you're right. There were a lot of recalcitrance on behalf of the operating technology environment. I didn't need to patch the wall full of instruments that I replaced with a digital control system. I didn't need any stinking patches in. Why do I need them now? There's a lot of that mindset that's still around, but frankly, The run till it rusts doesn't work with computers very well. Fact of the matter is, it's a moving target. You're constantly dealing with the fact that software, face it, Redmond will tell you, Microsoft Windows is patched. If you're running unpatched Windows, I don't know what you're running. It's something Windows-ish, but it's not really Windows. Yeah, I know it says Windows on it when you boot it up, but if you're not patching it, it's not Windows. And Redmond will tell you that. And when the manufacturer tells you you should stop running something like IE version 6, you should probably listen. When Symantec tells you, we're giving away PC Anywhere version 13 because, all the other ones are old and busted, and you should not run them, and they're giving you away the current version, you should probably pay attention. And so the run till it's rust mentality, I just don't think is going to travel into this decade and beyond. Sir?
You're aware of this, like the reason organizations are running IE6 is because the vendors is the only version of the crowd that works a lot better. So how do you get the vendors to change that?
Really, really hard. And respectfully, this is hard. Respectfully though, you got to think about this in at a broader term. Okay? Yeah, you put the system in planning a run for 30 years, 20, 30 years. Now, that's not actually working out too well. Matter of fact, keeping the hardware that you bought in 2004 running right now, it's kind of a challenge. A lot of that stuff, if you were to power it off, might not power back on. It's been running continuously since 2004, but it's, one power cycle away from being landfilled. And the viability of being able to do that is somewhat difficult. In this day and age, again, you can buy securable equipment in this day and age for ICS. That doesn't mean that you're not going to. And one of the great frustrations for us as security practitioners is people using $2016 to buy 2005 technology. They're willfully and deliberately buying the old and busted stuff because it's what they've already got. And when they can't, the manufacturer doesn't make it anymore, they go to eBay and the junk dealers to buy up all the spares. The forklift upgrade is a real problem that you described, but there's a lot of room between patching never and forklift. And what we're trying to get people to do is get off of that one position and start migrating toward the other by picking strategic security architectures and making evergreen programs, working with the vendors that will work with them. And frankly, if your vendor won't let you patch, they won't let you upgrade, respectfully, you should probably be looking at other vendors. The fight, the world's shortest motivational speech? I'm actively seeking your replacement. You got to be willing to say that and mean it to get some traction here. Another question.
How much commodity technology equipment do you see in here versus the industrial components and PLC stuff like that? Like you see WAPs, you see, big Cisco switches. Like how much commodity stuff do you see versus the specialized stuff?
Frankly, even most of the modern, you take some of the hot off the shelf stuff that you could buy in 2016, the latest versions of people's like Honeywell and Invencis, their control system, not down to the controllers, but at the HMI, the engineering workstation, and the servers, they look an awful lot like IT networks. They use Cisco switch fabrics. They use Windows and Red Hat Linux Enterprise. They look a lot like the same kind of gear that IT is. It just doesn't fall into the same domains. It doesn't fall into the same care and feeding. Absolutely. With care. But yes, you don't need, and again, that just gets you down, to the top layers of the control system, not down to the controllers. You get down into layer 1, what we think about where the controllers are, and layer 0, where the instrumentation and field buses are. Those tools don't work there at all. They're not protocol aware. They're not the equipment's not designed for the environment. There's one last slide that I'll leave you with is basically if you got the bug and you want to do this, if you're inside of OT, this gives you maybe some action points, things that you could do basically when you get home next week, and then in 3 months, and then within 6 months is an action plan as to how you might put some wheels on your desires and move them forward. And I've got the hook out, but I'll take one more question.
So you have a person who's currently, they're working in some sort of like right? They're kind of jack-off trained. So they can do this already. At all, they're not really in a place that is really making motivation. They're not really motivated to do anything. Like, worst case scenario is all that bad. grow and stuff like that. So they're really interested. They have a lab at home. They do everything. So the traditional security barrier, as far as like the industry, is getting your foot in the door security. Now they are engineers aware. They're not a security practitioner. You want to be, but there's no service to this. So that goes out and getting your foot in the door someplace.
Well, there is a cert now. Like I said, the GICSP is a cert that may be useful to them, and that's really in finding out who in the next 3 months, find out who inside that organization was responsible for securing the ICS. If there was an intrusion, if the ICS went down because of conflict or something like that, whose phone's going to ring? And finding those people who are responsible inside the organization would be the next conversation I would advise this guy to have, or gal.
Like he's trying to move into security, so he wants to be like he finds it very interesting. But he's like getting into the door to security. He already
Sure.
has knowledge, but both sides. But how does he actually get in the door? Who all is doing this other than obviously him?
The same things you do that if you're an IT guy trying to get security, you just apply to so things like I'm going to analyze the firmware that happens to be thinking. I'm going to write in that script, that happens to be for supporting documentation, like all parts of security, very well documented, right? So write an essence question that says, this is a PLC and stop all. There are little things you can do from a practitioner standpoint to get in the door. Without ever like side projects, right? Yeah. I already have the job in order to do this.
But let's say you've already done that, like you're writing a row analyzer and everything like that, like you're really interested. But it's like, how do you actually, like, who all is hiring for ICS also?
It's the same company, like maybe 5 or 6 or 10 companies all trying to hire. So, I work for Lockheed, I'm always trying to recruit, always trying to recruit me. So
But there's lots of room. That this guy, that someone that's interested, that's particularly taken some of the motivation, got some of the, like a GICSP or some other certification, or went to one of these classes, went to a Red Tiger security class or Lofty Perch class or even the DHS class on their own. Can I add that bullet? That's help recognition too. But going to like the ICS JWG and learning who to interact with, learning this community. These guys down here that came in to heckle me. The community helps you a lot. No, no, they were very well behaved. Have a donut.
security conference list that I put out, and look at who all the sponsors are, all the people are hired in that. And they can't still
Yeah.
rotating, comparison.
So you may not be the guy. You may not be the guy that you're not the guy. But if you know somebody that's a guy, yeah, by all means, let's have some conversations because and they got the hook out. I hate it. I'm here for the rest of the day. I'll talk about this to whatever links that you want to. Thank you very, very much.